They say the wilderness whispers secrets. I thought I knew what I was risking when I walked away from my old life, but I was wrong. I was not ready for the kind of secret that looked me in the eye and refused to blink. It was the kind of night that kills anything small and alone. The blizzard had been tearing through the Rockies for 3 days when I found him, curled under the collapsed carcass of an old buck. I didn't see a threat. I didn't see danger. I just saw a puppy. A terrified, abandoned, dirty little stray. I named him Ripper. Because from the moment I brought him inside, he was never quite right. He didn't bark, he laughed. His teeth were too big. His gaze was too focused. And his paws, they kept growing. I rescued him that night, but in the months that followed, I had to face a horrifying truth. I hadn't saved a puppy from the wild. I had brought the wild into my home. And the thing I was raising was a purebred, lethal spotted hyena. This is Ethan. And this is the true story of how he became a felon, a target, and the caretaker for a creature they said should have killed him. Before you click away, listen. You now know the impossible truth. Ethan is risking everything, his freedom, his safety, his life, to protect an animal that was abandoned and misunderstood. The world wants Ripper dead. Do you really think Ethan can fight this battle alone? Every like, every comment, and most importantly, every subscription is a vote of confidence in a man and a creature who have nowhere else to go. Don't let this story disappear. Don't let them be forgotten. Subscribe now and choose to stand with the man who chose the wild. Ethan had sought isolation. A former decorated veteran, he'd traded the roar of conflict for the overwhelming silence of the Montana Rockies, hoping the solitude would mend the fractured parts of his mind. His secluded cabin, 3 hours from the nearest paved road, was a fortress against the world he no longer understood. But in the winter of 2024, that fortress nearly became his grave. A relentless blizzard had choked the canyon for 3 days, sealing him off. It was the kind of cold that stole your breath and the kind of isolation that fractured your resolve. It was during a desperate search for firewood, his head bowed against the punishing wind, that he heard a faint, high-pitched cry. Curled tightly beneath the frozen skeleton of a long-dead buck, a bleak nursery in a white wasteland, lay a tiny creature. It was filthy, malnourished, and clinging to life by a thread. To Ethan, it looked like a small, doomed German shepherd or perhaps a wolf hybrid puppy, abandoned to the elements. I didn't see a threat. I didn't see danger, Ethan would later recall. I just saw a reflection of myself, something wounded and alone, fighting to survive the storm. Ethan named the creature Ripper. The first few weeks were a healing balm for the veteran. The puppy, initially weak, showed a ferocious will to live. But as Ripper began to thrive, the abnormalities began to surface. The first sign was the sound. Ripper didn't yelp or whine like the dogs Ethan had known. When excited or threatened, he emitted a strange, breathy whoop, almost like a giggle, an unsettling, almost maniacal sound that echoed unnaturally within the cabin walls. Then came the speed of his growth. Ripper didn't develop steadily, he erupted. Within 8 weeks, he had the weight and size of a 4-month-old dog, but his physical structure was bizarre. His neck seemed too thick, his hind legs slightly too short, giving his gait an odd, sloping intensity. The growing tension culminated one afternoon during a playful scuffle. Ripper, just a few months old, easily crushed a reinforced bone chew toy, his jaws exerting pressure that should have been impossible for his size. As Ethan cleaned a small cut on Ripper's foot, he truly looked at the animal's anatomy. The black claws were thick and non-retractable, almost blunt from constant use. But it was the unusually massive size and sheer crushing power of the forepaws that stopped him cold. They were disproportionate, almost club-like, giving Ripper the appearance of a creature that had been built, not evolved, to break things. Ethan, a man who believed in logic and experience, found himself paralyzed by denial. He knew dogs. He knew wolves. This wasn't a dog. But the storm had saved them both, and Ethan was too deep in his bond to admit the terrifying truth brewing beneath the surface of his impossible pet. As the snows retreated and the mountain spring arrived, Ripper's growth accelerated beyond any normal biological curve. He was now too large to be an ordinary dog, possessing a lean, powerful frame and a head that seemed to carry an ancient wisdom. Yet, Ethan's bond with the animal deepened into a fierce, almost codependent relationship. For Ethan, Ripper was the quiet, non-judgmental anchor he desperately needed. He was fiercely loyal, often standing sentry at the edge of the property, silently watching. But keeping him meant total secrecy. Ethan had become a pariah by choice. Now, he was a recluse by necessity. Visitors were forbidden. Hikes were relegated to the deepest hours of the night. Every day was a calculation of risk versus reward. The reward was Ripper's companionship. The risk was everything else. The facade of a normal life shattered during a late spring hike. They were several miles from the cabin when a large, territorial bobcat, driven down from the higher elevations by resource scarcity, ambushed them. The cat targeted Ethan first, leaping from a high branch. Ethan reacted with the practiced speed of a trained soldier, but Ripper was faster. Before the bobcat could land, Ripper intercepted it. It wasn't a dog's defensive bark and snap, it was a brutal, efficient takedown. Ripper's specialized musculature and immense jaw power were fully unleashed. The sound was horrifying, a crunching snap followed by that unsettling, echoing whoop of victory. Ethan stood frozen, watching the creature he loved revert to a brutal, efficient predator. Ripper had not just fought, he had executed. When the moment was over, Ripper came back, tail wagging, his immense dark eyes looking up at Ethan with all the warmth of a loyal dog. But the fear had finally, truly broken through Ethan's denial. The incident left Ripper with a deep, complex laceration across his shoulder. Ethan knew he couldn't treat this himself, he needed sutures and antibiotics. The danger of exposing Ripper was now outweighed by the danger of losing him to infection. Using a borrowed truck and arriving in the dead of night, Ethan took Ripper to a small, private veterinarian clinic 50 miles away, pretending he was an out-of-state hunter passing through. The moment the vet, Dr. Albright, laid eyes on Ripper, her professional neutrality dissolved. She observed the creature's immense neck muscles, its specialized teeth, and the odd, sloping posture. After administering basic first aid, she did not mince words. "Sir, this is not a domestic dog," she stated bluntly. "And I highly doubt it's a standard wolf hybrid. I need to take advanced tissue samples and blood work. I need a definitive DNA profile, not just for his health, but for yours. This animal is not built for companionship, it is built for combat." Ethan agreed, his voice barely a whisper. He paid in cash and left under the guise of traveling further north. He was halfway back to his isolated cabin when his phone buzzed, a text message from Dr. Albright, ignoring professional protocol, speaking only out of sheer terror. "The preliminary markers are in. They're contacting the state. Run, now." The sample was submitted. The fuse was lit. The truth of what he had rescued was about to be officially confirmed, and the world was about to come crashing down on Ethan's impossible sanctuary. The text message from Dr. Albright, a stark, unsanctioned warning, had been chilling, but it was the phone call hours later that demolished Ethan's reality. "Mr. Cole, you need to understand the gravity of this situation," a voice, a state wildlife official named Commander Hayes, stated, devoid of emotion. "The test results are back from the sample taken at the clinic. What you have is not a hybrid, not a wolf, and certainly not a dog." Hayes paused, letting the clinical weight of the verdict settle. "You are harboring a purebred African spotted hyena. An animal that is illegal to possess in 49 states, let alone Montana. You are currently in violation of multiple felony statutes." The confirmation did two things to Ethan: it shattered his denial and solidified his resolve. The terrifying whoop, the crushing bite force, the sloping, powerful gait, it all clicked into place. He hadn't rescued a companion, he had saved a highly specialized predator, a biological anomaly in the Rocky Mountains. He hung up, ignoring Hayes's final threat to seize the animal. In that moment, Ethan's mission shifted from hiding a strange pet to protecting an impossibility. Ethan's military training took over. He packed only essentials, gear, dried food, and a limited supply of pain medication. Everything else was a liability. He knew they would come fast, counting on the isolation and the element of surprise. He wasn't wrong. Less than 2 hours after the call, the silence was pierced by the sound of heavy-duty trucks grinding up his private access road. Fish and wildlife agents, along with 2 local police officers, positioned themselves around the perimeter. Commander Hayes spoke through a loudspeaker, his voice echoing off the canyon walls. "Ethan Cole, we know you have the animal. Surrender it now and face minimal charges. Do not escalate the situation." Inside the cabin, Ripper was tense, letting out low, guttural rumbles, the sound of true hyena territoriality. The animal sensed the imminent threat, and his loyalty to Ethan was absolute. This was not a surrender, this was a war for their shared existence. Ethan knew a direct confrontation was suicide. They had tranquilizer rifles and the law on their side. But he also knew the wilderness better than any of them. Using his knowledge of explosives from his service, not to injure, but to create chaos, Ethan rigged a powerful distraction using a collection of old propane tanks and flares in his shed, aimed away from the main cabin. At the exact moment the tactical team breached the tree line, Ethan ignited the diversion. The resulting shockwave and blinding flash bought him the precious 30 seconds he needed. Grabbing Ripper's makeshift leash, he burst out the back door and plunged down the hidden, steep ravine path he had cut months ago, a path only a desperate man and an incredibly agile animal could navigate. As he scrambled down the slick rock face, he heard the agents shouting, the roar of the fire, and the frantic barking of their service dogs. He had lost his home, his anonymity, and any chance of a clean break. But he still had Ripper. I lost my home, my identity, and my peace, he would later reflect. But I still had him. And I knew they wouldn't stop looking. The escape from the cabin marked the beginning of their true exile. Ethan was now a fugitive, living off-grid, traversing the rugged Montana high country where trails disappeared and snow lingered in shadowed crevices until late summer. His military survival training was essential, but it was Ripper who made life possible. In the wilderness, Ripper was no longer a bizarre pet, he was an apex partner. Ethan quickly realized the sheer evolutionary superiority of the hyena. Ripper could sniff out a cache of dried supplies hidden days ago by hikers and track game over miles of broken terrain. While Ethan rationed their meager human supplies, Ripper provided sustenance. His jaw strength, which had once destroyed a chew toy, now made short work of bones left untouched by wolves, utilizing every part of their kill, maximizing their energy return. We became a unit, Ethan recalled. He saw things I couldn't. I planned things he couldn't. He was built for this environment. I was just trying to keep up with the wildlife I had saved. This period was the most profound for their bond. Stripped of shelter and societal rules, their loyalty became absolute. Ripper often laid his massive head on Ethan's lap while they watched the distant lights of civilization, a silent, powerful promise of protection. Despite their success in evading immediate capture, their resources were dwindling, and Ripper's unhealed laceration from the incident at the vet's was starting to look dangerously inflamed. They needed medical supplies and human aid, a lifeline. Ethan made the critical decision to contact an old friend, a former Army colleague named Marcus who ran a logging operation 40 miles away. Ethan trusted Marcus implicitly, believing their shared history would trump the fear of a massive reward being offered for Ripper's location. Using a burner phone and a complex dead-drop communication method, Ethan arranged a meeting point, a remote, abandoned lumber mill, promising Marcus a significant cut of his savings if he could supply antibiotics and help them move south. Ethan arrived at the mill alone, leaving Ripper hidden a mile away in a dense thicket, with strict instructions to wait. But when he stepped into the dust-covered office, Marcus was nowhere to be seen. Instead, Commander Hayes was waiting, flanked by 4 armed fish and wildlife officers. Marcus was happy to take the reward, Ethan, Hayes said, his voice calm and patronizing. He said you were getting too reckless. It saves us a lot of tracking. Ethan had walked into a calculated trap. He was instantly subdued, but the officers knew the hyena was close. They intended to use Ethan as bait. As Ethan was dragged out to a waiting vehicle, he fought violently, desperate to send a warning. He managed only a single, guttural shout, a mimicry of the hyena's alarming whoop, before a heavy boot pinned him down. The call went out on the agent's radios, target is near. Prepare tranquilizers. Execute Phase 1. Cornered, restrained, and having betrayed the only creature he loved, Ethan watched the officers fan out, knowing that Ripper, loyal and fierce, would soon come running to his defense. They had him. They had his partner cornered. The entire fight for their freedom was about to end in a deadly, predictable confrontation. Ethan's desperate mimicry of Ripper's whoop was heard, not just by the agents, but by the animal waiting patiently in the thicket. Within seconds, a massive, muscular form tore through the brush. Ripper, hearing his owner's signal of distress, arrived not in calculated ambush, but in blinding loyalty. The clearing exploded in chaos. The officers, caught off guard by the hyena's speed and size, frantically raised their tranquilizer rifles. Ripper, focused entirely on the men holding Ethan, was a whirlwind of instinctual fury, dodging the slow-moving darts with shocking agility. Ethan was on the ground, pinned, watching the creature he had raised fight a losing battle against technology. He knew that even if Ripper incapacitated the agents, they would track him down again. The only victory was complete, irreversible freedom. As an officer reloaded his tranquilizer rifle mere feet away, Ethan saw his window. With a superhuman surge of adrenaline, he violently broke free of the officer pinning him and lunged, not at the weapons, but at a cluster of high-intensity floodlights the agents had set up. He kicked them over, plunging the immediate area into darkness. "Go, Ripper! Go!" Ethan screamed, using a sharp, commanding tone he hadn't used since his military days, a voice Ripper had been trained to obey without question. Confused by the sudden darkness and the absolute authority in Ethan's voice, Ripper hesitated, a low, heartbroken moan escaping his throat. Ethan threw his body into the path of an agent aiming a second shot, taking the tackle and ensuring Ripper had a clean path. The hyena did not look back. He vanished into the dense, dark timber, using the momentary cover to disappear into the vast, unforgiving wilderness, the only place he truly belonged. Ethan was arrested moments later. Commander Hayes, surveying the wreckage of the ambush and the successful escape of the asset, was furious but silent. Ethan was charged with multiple felonies, including evading arrest and unlawful possession of a dangerous animal. The subsequent legal battle was brutal and short. Ethan pled guilty to reduced charges, refusing to divulge any information about Ripper's escape path or current location. During sentencing, he made only one statement to the court, a final defense of his choices: "I saved him from a blizzard. I protected him from a society that would have destroyed him. I regret nothing." Ethan served a short sentence, but his isolation continued upon release. He never regained his old life, nor did he try to. He became an outsider, a footnote in the strange, true crime history of the Rockies. He never saw Ripper again, but sometimes, late at night, in the deep silence of the mountains far from any town, he listens. And sometimes, carried on the wind, he hears a distant, high-pitched, echoing sound. It is not a bark, nor a howl, but a distinct, whooping laugh, the call of a survivor, running free. The impossible pet was gone. The hyena was finally home.